Welcome to the channel. This is Ars Poetic, and I appreciate you checking out my video review of the Scuf Reflex PS5 controller. If you haven't seen it already, I made a preview video on this controller, which talks about my experience with the Scuf Vantage controller and my perspective on pro controllers as a left-handed gamer who uses custom controller mapping. I recommend you check out that video first to get my full perspective on why I think pro controllers can provide a significant increase to the quality of your gameplay experience. The link will be in the description of this video. The three controllers which make up Scuf's Reflex line for PS5 are the Reflex, Reflex Pro, and the Reflex FPS. At the time of recording this video, you can seemingly place your order at any time, as well as customize the controller with your preferred mix of features and colors. When I originally ordered, I had to pick from an email list and pick from whatever colors were available. I was lucky enough to place my order for the black version after about a month and a half of patiently waiting, and ended up receiving it towards the end of February of 2022. I'm recording this video now in June, so I've had my controller for about 3.5 months, and I'm happy to say that I'm still loving it. It fully delivered on my expectations, and I can confidently say that this is the best PS5 Pro controller that you can buy right now at this time. While there have been more options out there in the PS4 market, no PS4 controllers are compatible with PS5 games, rendering those options obsolete unless you only plan to play PS4 titles or a game on PC. I wish the price tag on this thing was not so damn high, with the cheapest of the three starting at $200 and the most expensive at $260. If you're willing to bite that bullet, you're getting a quality PS5 controller that just can't be beat right now. Still, I hope the prices eventually drop to a more reasonable range, which I think would be around the $120 to $160 mark. The only difference between the standard and the Pro version are the textured grips, which bring up the price to $230. The FPS model replaces the adaptive triggers with instant triggers and bumpers that are more in line with mouse clicks. I personally enjoy the adaptive triggers when in use and don't care so much about that minimal extra performance benefit, which is why I went for the Pro model instead. The PS5 DualSense controller already offers really comfortable ergonomics, which are much improved from the previous DualShock 4s. It was a wise decision on Scuf's part to stick to the default PlayStation form factor this time around. The ergonomics here are excellent as Scuf implemented some much needed improvements. Before we get into the details, let's go over what you get in the box. The first thing I noticed when I got my order was that the box didn't specify which version of the Reflex controller you have. Knowing I ordered the Pro version, my heart sank when I didn't see Pro written anywhere on the box. Thankfully, the right controller was inside. Along with your controller, you will also receive a set of thumbsticks, which are easily interchangeable. There's also a pretty nice 6-foot braided USB cable. The controller itself has a very nice finish. I went for the all black option, though the other color options and combinations look cool too. The Pro and FPS versions come with a textured rubber design on the handles for extra grip and comfort. The thumbsticks have a lightly textured ring around the edges, which is also pretty nice. If you haven't already figured out what style you prefer, I would recommend experimenting with the domed and concave sticks to see what you like. I find the domed ones to be comfortable for long play, and I like to have my left stick extended since I typically aim with it, providing me a bit more leverage when going for accuracy. I used to use those Control Freak thumb caps on the standard controller, but I don't find the need to use these here since I just use the raised analog stick. If you do want to use your Control Freaks or similar thumbstick covers, they don't quite fit on the concave thumbsticks, with the little clips not fully grasping the edges of the analog sticks. And so if you put enough pressure on them, you'll probably just slide them off. With the previous Scuf Vantage, I didn't like the thumbsticks that came with those as much, and so I ordered a pair of Sony standard thumbstick replacements from Scuf. You can also do the same for the Reflex if you prefer. The paddles themselves feel great. I typically use my middle fingers to hit these, and I find that the placement is perfect. Not only is the placement spot on, the two inner paddles have an edge that slightly rises up, which makes for easier pressing. This was a very smart design choice because this also allows you to just sort of nudge your fingers to the center and hit those inner paddles while also maintaining your position on the outer paddle simultaneously. I didn't find replacement paddles on Scuf's website at this time, but I'm sure they'll put those up at some point. Or you could always try contacting their support if you need a replacement. With this improvement in the design and overall build quality though, I don't foresee most people needing to replace these. As someone who was a fan of the sax buttons on the Scuf Vantage, I wish they had included some option for that here, but I do think that the improvement of the inner paddle ergonomics sort of makes up for it. The face buttons are essentially the same as the standard DualSense controller, but they don't have any of the symbols. This gives it a cleaner aesthetic, I suppose, but I wouldn't have minded something similar to what's on the regular DualSense. If you're interested in buying a Pro controller to begin with, chances are you wouldn't even need to look at the controller for the buttons anyways, though passing it off to someone less experienced might cause a little confusion. The PS button is replaced by a home button, which makes sense. Though I personally prefer having the little PS logo, the home button is slightly more recessed, so it may help a little bit for those of you that press the PS button on accident during gameplay. I wouldn't count on it though. The controller allows you to keep 3 profiles stored, which can simply be swapped with a touch of the profile button on the back. Each profile has its own color to let you know which one you're on. It lights up temporarily when switching profiles, but is otherwise off when in use. To edit an individual profile, simply hold down the profile button until your light is blinking. Hold down the paddle that you wish to remap and press the button you wish to remap it to. The profile light will blink white for just a second to let you know it registered the change. While almost all of the buttons can be remapped, including the sticks, L1 and R1, the triggers and the touchpad cannot be remapped to the paddles. However, you can work around this easily if you do want to map L2 and R2 to any of the 4 paddles. Just go into your system accessibility options and remap the triggers to literally any other buttons. Now all you have to do is assign the newly remapped triggers to the paddles. All of the regular functions of the controller work as expected. Battery life seems to be the same as the regular PS5 controller, which is fine, but it also means it's not that great. While I dim the controller lights in the system settings, I do keep vibration, trigger intensity, and speakers set to maximum. You can squeeze more life out of a charge if you lower these settings, of course, but I don't mind the trade-off. You can just plug in your controller as needed to your console, or perhaps keep a battery bank or compatible power adapter nearby. You might be wondering if the controller functionality carries over to the PC platform. Thankfully, everything works exactly the same on PC, with the exception of the mute button, of course. I've tested out multiple games on Steam and even emulators to see how the controller would work out. Since all of the profiles and mappings are baked into the controller itself, nothing changes here, and all of the paddles remain usable and remappable, along with the profile switching. In fact, if you're using a remapping software like Rewazd, you could potentially map the triggers and the touchpad if you so desire, though I think in most cases Steam or whatever emulator will get the job done. Since the mute button doesn't work, you might as well remap it to something useful. Using Rewazd, I actually made the mute button my music controller. When I press it once, it plays or pauses the music, twice skips the next track, and pressing it 3 times goes to the prior track. I wish I was able to remap the mute button on the PS5, since my wireless headset has its own mute button already. Using this controller with Steam is a breeze since it recognizes it as a DualSense controller, and throwing on big picture mode makes for a nice console-like experience. The emulators I tested picked up the controller with no issue at all. I've been having a great time using the controller for Breath of the Wild, for instance. I would advise using a USB connection to make switching between the PC and your PS5 easier. If you want to use the controller wirelessly on PC, just press and hold the home button along with the share button until it goes into pairing mode, which will be indicated by the flashing light. Then simply add it as a Bluetooth device in your system settings. When doing this, it will be paired to your PC and will no longer work wirelessly with your PS5. To repair it with your PS5, simply connect it to the console with a USB cable. So let's say you're interested in all that a controller of this caliber has to offer, but can't quite stomach the exorbitant price tag. which is a perfectly reasonable scenario to find yourself in. You might be left wondering if there are any alternative options that have a more palatable price point. I'm glad to report that Extreme Rate offers a compelling alternative solution with 4 back buttons at the price of $44.99. There's only one catch: you'll have to assemble it yourself. Thankfully, Extreme Rate provides the necessary tools and their own video guide that can help you through the process step by step. If you want the ability to map L3, R3, or the touchpad, then that does include some soldering action. Don't get discouraged by that though, because I think in most cases those are inputs you wouldn't really remap anyways. So if you skip the soldering, the process is very simple and will likely take you about a half hour or so. Before getting the Scuf controller, I had actually ordered 2 of their kits to install on both of my DualSense controllers. I purchased these before they came out with the 4 paddle version, meaning that my Extreme Rate kits only had the 2 back paddles. They definitely worked well and are also remappable on the fly, but I found that you sort of get what you pay for when it comes to build quality. One of my paddles had broken off after just a couple of months, which was pretty unfortunate. Extreme Rate now sells replacement kits for the housing and paddles, but they didn't sell these at the time mine broke, which is why I went ahead and purchased a second kit. The other thing worth noting here is that at this time it looks like the replacement parts are only for the 2 paddle version, and they don't seem to have any replacement for the 4 paddle kits. I imagine they'll add these to their website later down the road, but you could also try contacting them directly if you need a replacement for yours. If that doesn't work, you'll just have to buy a new kit like I did. So if you want to take your controller to the next level but are on a budget, I would still recommend these kits, but I would just advise you to be extra careful with them. I hope that the durability has improved on the newer models, but I can't say for sure since I haven't had extended time using them. Overall, I think they still offer good bang for buck, especially when comparing to the Scuf Reflex, which is literally about 5 times the cost or more depending on which model you're comparing. So even if you do break these and have to replace the entire kit more than once, you'd still likely pay less than the cost of admission for the premium Reflex. If the idea of taking apart your controller and assembling the paddles yourself turns you off to this budget option, you can buy a customized pre-built using these same kits from Hex Gaming for about $200. There are also other options online, but they all seem to sit around that $200 mark. And some of those options don't even have remappable functionality, meaning that you're stuck with whichever paddle or button configuration you choose. At that price point, I think you might as well spend a little more dough on a Reflex, because I think the better build quality and overall features would be well worth it if you're already willing to spend that kind of money on a controller. Another thing to consider is that Sony might make their own back button attachment, just like they did for the DualShock 4 controllers. While that attachment only added 2 paddles, it currently sells for just $20, which is an incredible value. You simply plug it into the front of the controller and that's it. The attachment is remappable on the fly and has the ability to save 3 different profiles as well. It also has an OLED screen showing you what buttons are mapped upon configuration. The build quality is pretty nice, and despite the centerpiece looking a bit bulky, I didn't find it to get in my way at all when using it. I would highly recommend just starting out with one of those if you're still gaming on PS4 or game on PC with a standard DualShock 4 controller. Considering how late in the PS4 lifecycle Sony came out with this product, I'm sure they will do an updated version for their PS5 controllers at some point. If you made it through the whole video up to this point, then I'm sure you can tell that I do love nearly everything about this controller, and it has definitely improved my gameplay experiences across all types of games on PS5 and PC, including the various emulators I tested. While I still think these controllers are overpriced, I am very satisfied with my purchase. If you want that premium pro controller experience, I don't believe you can go wrong with any of these controllers in the Scuf Reflex line. If you're hesitant to drop that kind of dough, you might want to check out those Extreme Rate DIY kits. While the build quality and extra features like custom profiles aren't there, you'd still get the base level experience of having extra paddles at a fraction of the cost. I know it's been a long time coming, but I'm really glad to finally have this video review out after spending over 3 months with this controller. Kudos to you if you've made it through this whole video. I really do appreciate each and every view. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out the other content I have on my channel and subscribe if you think you'd enjoy my upcoming videos. I have many videos planned for the future of this channel, and I'm looking forward to sharing them all with you. That's it for now. This is Ars Poetic, dropping the mic. Peace.